To Senator Marco Rubio firing up the crowds as he announced his candidacy for president on Monday night. He said it's time for a new generation of Republicans to lead the way in America. And Senator Rubio joins me now. Good to have you with us, Senator.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So you know what they say when they hear that, some folks. They say, well, he's too young. We tried the one-term senator last time around, and it didn't work out that well. What do you say to that?
Well, first, the reason why it didn't work out is not because he was only in the Senate for one term. He wasn't even in the Senate for one term. The reason why it didn't work out is because Barack Obama's ideas don't work. I don't care if he had been here for 50 years. If you try to grow government massively, Obamacare, his failed foreign policy, these things wouldn't work for anybody. They weren't going to work for John Kerry after many years in the Senate he'd been elected, and they weren't going to work for Barack Obama and for America. And the second point I would make is my history up to this point is quite different than the president's today. I served 9 years in the Florida legislature. I was the Speaker of the Florida House, the third largest state in the country, and I'll have served a full Senate term before I swear in as president. That includes my service on the Intelligence Committee and on the Foreign Relations Committee. So I feel very confident that I'm ready to do this job. You know,
on the youth front, I don't think a lot of people realize that you and Ted Cruz are basically the same age. I think you just look a little bit younger.
Well, don't tell Ted that.
All right, so the Wall Street Journal, of course, took a crack at your candidacy yesterday. They gave you very strong points on foreign policy, but they wonder if you are really a reformer. You know, they talk about people like Scott Walker, to a certain extent Chris Christie. They want someone who's a true reformer. Are you one, and who and what would you take on first?
Well, first of all, my whole career has been about reform. When I was in the Florida legislature, before I became Speaker, we went out and collected ideas from everyday Floridians, thousands of ideas, and we published those in a book called 100 Ideas for Florida's Future. And then we went out and actually implemented that agenda, passing all of those things out of the House. More than half of them became law or policy in Florida. And then here in the Senate, I've constantly rolled out reform ideas. Obviously, when Harry Reid was the majority leader, they didn't get very far. But whether it's VA reform, which we helped accomplish, whether it's reforming the way we grant foreign aid, and now with Mike Lee on the tax code, I've offered reforms on poverty programs. So on issue after issue, you know, we have the most well-built-out, concise foreign policy document of anyone who's entered the race so far. We're proud of that work, and that's what our campaign will be built on.
Yeah, but I guess, you know, what would you take on first? A lot of people say that tax reform, everybody likes tax reform, right? All Americans, when you do polls, say they're in favor of it. But nobody ever follows through because then the lobbyists come in, the lawyers come in, the accountant lobbyists come in, and somehow it gets lost in the shuffle every time.
Yeah, I'm sorry I left that part out. There are three things we have to do, and we actually have to do all three at the same time. You can't really do these in sequential order. We have to become globally competitive again. The 21st century economy is a global economy. We have to compete with other countries for jobs and innovation. That's why we need to do tax reform. I have a specific tax reform plan. I'll actually be talking about it today at the Heritage Foundation along with Mike Lee. Regulatory reform, we have a plan on that. Repeal and replace Obamacare, we have a plan on that. And balancing our budget through entitlement reform. Second to that is we need to help reform higher education. We have to give people 21st century skills for 21st century jobs. Today we're not doing that. We're not training people to leave high school ready to go to work as a welder or an electrician. And kids are borrowing money for degrees that don't lead to jobs. And third is we have to rebuild our military. We have to stop these very dangerous cuts to defense spending and reinvigorate American foreign policy around the world. And we've been very outspoken specifically about what we would do in that regard.
It's a tough job. Immigration obviously is an issue that everybody, it's a very hot button issue where you're concerned. Your critics say that the proposal that you had, the bill that you brought forward was amnesty. Other people said it was courageous and that you backed down. So under President Rubio, who would get to stay in this country and who has to go home?
Well, first of all, we need to do immigration reform, and that hasn't changed. The only thing that I've said is we're not going to be able to do it in one massive piece of legislation. And I say that because we tried it, and it doesn't work. And the main reason why it doesn't work is Americans do not trust that the federal government will enforce immigration laws, something that's been proven by the ex-president's executive order. So step one has to be to prove to the American people, show them that we are enforcing our immigration laws and that illegal immigration is under control. And if we can do that, then I think we can move forward on modernizing our system towards a merit-based system and also realistically and reasonably dealing with the 11 or 12 million people that have been here for longer than a decade illegally but have not otherwise violated the law. But we can't do any of that until we prove we're going to enforce our immigration laws.
And enforce the existing laws on the books. for you. There are going to be likely 13 candidates in this race on the Republican side. And the bottom line question is, how do you win where Mitt Romney lost? We're going to put up some numbers here. The Hispanic vote last time around, Mitt Romney got this is the youth vote, 37% to President Obama's 60%. And the Hispanic numbers look like this for everybody at home. 27% went to Mitt Romney. 71% of the Hispanic vote went to President Obama. So what is your plan for winning?
Well, let me first say that I don't think you can be president of the United States by targeting your message to one group versus another. I don't think the future of our country should be built on helping some people at the expense of others. We have a message and we have a policies that actually help all Americans, because in fact we can all be better off without anybody being worse off. That's why I talk about things like student loan debt. That's why I talk about things about making us globally competitive. I want America to be the best place in the world to invest and innovate. That will help create millions of better paying jobs. I want to reform higher education, both traditional college, alternatives to traditional college, technical training in high schools, so that our people have the skills for those 21st century jobs. And I want America to be a global force for good once again, and not meaning we're going to get involved in every civil war on the planet. But in the 21st century, we can't be prosperous without global stability. And you cannot have global stability without strong American leadership. I think this is an agenda that helps everyone, no matter where you came from, how your last name is pronounced, or where you may live.
All right. Senator Rubio, thank you very much. We're going to have some more questions for you in just a bit.
He is back with us. And Senator, good morning to you from Capitol Hill.
Good morning.
On Iran, the vote was 19-0 in this committee. What does that tell the president?
I think it tells the president that there's a strong, almost unanimous bipartisan consensus in the Senate that the Senate has to play a role in this deal. In fact, what the president is asking for is he's going to, or he wants to, unilaterally lift sanctions under a national security waiver built into the original sanctions bill. And what Congress is saying is we want to have a role in preventing you from doing that if we don't think this deal is good enough. And what it's very clear is that while we may disagree about the specifics of what that sort of process should look like, the enormous majority of Republicans and Democrats in the United States Senate believe that the Congress must play a role in overseeing and providing oversight on the deal.
And I think that is clear. And listening to Bob Corker talk about it, I think you're exactly right about that. But in the big picture, what does this now say about Iran's capacity to go nuclear?
About the deal in general? Mm-hmm. The deal will allow them to keep in place the infrastructure they will need to one day build a weapon. And by the way, a weapons program for Iran isn't just the enrichment of uranium or the reprocessing of plutonium. It's a bomb design, which they could literally buy from multiple countries or individuals around the world. It's a delivery system, for example, a long-range rocket, which is not even part of this conversation. And they continue to aggressively build up their abilities to construct long-range rockets, one capable of reaching the United States. Those things are untouched by this deal. And they're going to keep infrastructure, critical infrastructure that at some point in the future they could flip the switch on and build a bomb. And that's what I'm most concerned about. I think it almost guarantees that at some point they'll move forward in that direction.
Wow. Guarantees?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the radical Shia cleric they call the supreme leader that governs Iran wants Iran to have the capability not just to hold America hostage, but to destroy the state of Israel. I believe that because he has said it. And I think if someone continuously says they want to destroy Israel, we should start believing them.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are left shaking their head because even Steny Hoyer, a House Democrat leader on the House side, said there is not a framework. So I mean, it just seems like both sides are talking past each other yet again on this. So more to come on that. Now on Cuba, what's the big crime in taking that country off the state-sponsored terrorist list?
Well, first of all, Cuba now harbors dozens of fugitives of American justice. Those include people that have stolen millions of dollars in taxpayer money through Medicare fraud. They're now on the island of Cuba enjoying that money. That includes a cop killer, a woman that killed a police officer in New Jersey, someone on the 10 most wanted list by the FBI. Second, Cuba is the country that helped North Korea try to evade UN sanctions. They were caught just a year ago trying to do that. It's a country that gives material support to the revolutionary group inside Colombia, a terrorist group. And in addition to that, this is a country that has two high military officials that have been indicted by a U.S. federal grand jury for being involved in the murder of two U.S. citizens, pilots of Brothers to the Rescue, who were shot down over international airspace. So they have all the elements of a terrorist-sponsor nation.
Yeah, and you want to be president. And if you were president, what would you do on Cuba?
They would go right back on that list.
What would be your policy?
Well, first of all, Cuba would go back on the state sponsor of terrorism list. Second of all, it would move aggressively through using radio and TV Marti platforms to actually deliver not just content, but access to the Cuban people, to the internet, through wireless technologies, using satellite technology, things the Cubans cannot block, the Cuban government cannot block. And third, I would increase the support to democracy groups within the island of Cuba so that we can build a strong civil society prepared to help to guide that country in a democratic direction when Raul and Fidel Castro exit the scene, as they will invariably here soon. They're both over 80 years of age.
Yeah, and Senator, thank you for your time. There's more to talk about. We'll get another opportunity again soon. Thank you. Marco Rubio from Washington Today.